Good evening and welcome to ECISD Live. My name is Scott Murray and I'm the Superintendent of Ector County Independent School District, and it's a pleasure to welcome you live tonight. I, however, am not live tonight. We pre-recorded this particular segment. I'm actually testifying today in the city of Austin, working with the House Appropriations Committee on the teacher retirement system and our use of ESSER dollars. But you are in for an exciting live event this evening. And before we do that, I want to provide a few quick district updates. First of all, next week, parents, pay close attention. On Wednesday, the 14th of September, we'll be having our very first early release day in ECISD. And so parents, make sure you reach out to your school, either on the website or talk with your child's teacher to know the exact time that you'll be releasing on that particular day. Students will begin the day on their regular schedule and then release around the noon hour. The reason we do this is to provide professional development opportunities for our teachers and administrators. And so as we send the kids home for the day, our teachers and leaders will gather together and talk about kids and the service that we provide to them, kind of honing our skills as educators to ensure that we're providing a great academic experience for those kids. So once again, parents, next Wednesday, September 14th, the very first early release day of the school year. Secondly, we are busy right now partnering with some other community organizations looking for students that have made the unfortunate decision to drop out of high school. There are lots of kids within our community that have made that decision. We'd like to bring them back into ECISD or into one of the academic programs that we have within our community. In fact, just today, it just ended a few minutes ago, our team, along with some other organizations, were at the Music City Mall meeting with kids that had dropped out of high school, encouraging them to come back. So I encourage you tonight, as parents or community members, if you're aware of somebody, perhaps it's a neighbor or somebody that you engage with on a regular basis, and they've made the decision to drop out of high school, it isn't too late for them to earn that high school diploma. They can reach out to ECISD on our website, www.ectorcountyisd.org, to find out more about our dropout recovery programs and what they need to do to re-enroll in ECISD to indeed earn that high school diploma. Now, as we transition into our show for the evening, we want to think about tonight a high school graduate. We're going to work with you collaboratively tonight to create the portrait of a high school graduate. When you think about a student graduating from ECISD, what is important that that child knows and is able to do to be successful in the world? We want to hear from you tonight, and this evening's experience will be highly engaging. We need your feedback to help us paint the picture of a high school graduate in ECISD, and we call that the portrait of a graduate. So sit back and relax tonight. You're going to listen to a few folks and then sit up in your chair and engage in this conversation. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Lilia Nanya. She's our Chief Academic Officer, and she's going to introduce you to her colleagues tonight, and we'll take it away from that. So Dr. Nanya, we're all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Murray. And so we want to welcome all of our community members, our staff members, our ECISD family to tonight's ECISD live event. Tonight is really special because we need your input. We have been working for about a year and a half now on improving our school district's college, career, and military readiness. And so part of that body of work engages us in defining and really understanding what we believe the graduates from Ector County ISD should know and be able to do when they leave, when they walk across the stage after graduation. And so we have embarked in this wonderful journey, and through that journey, we have partnered with Knowledge Works, a group of individuals, an organization that helps states across our nation with this kind of work. So I would love to introduce our team members or our partners from Knowledge Works tonight. We have Abby Everett, who is the Director of Teaching and Learning. She joins us tonight here in Odessa. along with the other Director of Teaching and Learning, Sid Young. So welcome to the Permian Basin and specifically Ector County ISD. We're excited that you're here tonight. We have one more guest all the way from Pennsylvania. His name is Jason Swanson, and he has such a unique title to the work that he does. He's the Director of Strategic Foresight. And so, Jason, later on in the show, I'm going to ask you to kind of define what your position means, strategic foresight. That's quite interesting. So we welcome all of these partners that work with Knowledge Works, and we're very excited about this body of work because our purpose of tonight's meeting is to begin with the end in mind. What do we see that our kids need to know and demonstrate mastery of when they leave our doors, when they leave our buildings, when they graduate from NTO or Odessa Techs or Odessa OCA or Permian High School or Odessa High School? What characteristics should our students have and master when they leave our system? And so, as I mentioned earlier, this is a body of work, a part of a larger body of work that ECISD has engaged in over the last year. And part of the vision setting of our college, career, and military work is based on the ECISD graduate profile. And so as we move forward, we want to share with you the summary of, not the summary, but the work that we have already engaged in, what our process has been to engage community members and stakeholders through the process of data gathering. So we're going to look at a little like a timeline of what we have implemented thus far as we work through the graduate profile process. So in just a minute, you're going to see an image of arrows that we have engaged in for about the last 6 months. So where you see the star now is where we are. We're in the last phase of stakeholder data collection. And we've met with student groups within ECISD to get input from them on what skills and characteristics they believe they should master when they graduate. We've also gathered input from community stakeholders, the education partnership of the Permian Basin. We've done sessions with them. We've engaged in discussions with Odessa College and UTPB. We've engaged in this data collection with our district leadership teams, including campus principals. And now we're coming to you, our staff members, we're coming to our community and our parents to gather input and just get information on what you believe our graduates the skill sets that they should possess. So once we complete tonight's event and data collection, ECISD has a CCMR or College Career and Military Readiness Working Group, along with Contigo Ed and Knowledge Works. We're going to process, internalize, and determine the trends that we have gathered during all the stakeholder meetings that we've engaged in throughout time, from the spring until tonight. And then once we identify those trends, we will come back to you, our stakeholders, to get feedback on the trends that we've identified through our meetings, with our goal being that we will have and roll out the ECISD graduate profile by December of 2022. And then once we have that, we know what our graduates should possess with regards to skills and mindsets. Then we're going to expand that. What will it look like as a kindergarten student, as a fifth grade student? What kind of skills should our fifth graders have when they complete fifth grade and move on to sixth grade? So we're going to take this to scale as we move forward. So we're very excited about this work. And, we really want to establish what a shared vision looks like. And so I want to bring in Abby Everett to talk about what this process, what this shared vision look like, sound like, feel like for an individual and as a community.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Nanez. And one of the things that we work with a lot of schools with on around the country is this idea of a me to we mindset. And when we're thinking about a shared vision, how do you make it shared? How is it owned by your community? And one of the ways we think about that is who created the vision. And so if it's created by a few people in an office, then it's not shared. And so the purpose of tonight and the stakeholder meetings that have been happening is to collect inputs, collect your voice, collect your thoughts, and figure out how, as a community, a learning community, that we can own this work and figure out what do we want our graduates to have and how can we get behind that and help them to get there. So we'll be talking about that and getting. One of the things we want to do too, Dr. Nanez, is show a video of what this has looked like in another community. And this other community is not ECISD. They went through their own process and created their own inputs, and you're going to see what was meaningful for them. But keep in mind, as you're hearing from this learning community, what will be important in ECISD? What's coming up for you as a member of this community, this learning community, what might be important? So we'll learn from someone else and then get to what's local for ECISD.
Absolutely. We're excited to see this video.
My commitment as the principal of the school is to make sure that my teachers have everything they need in order to help our students be the most successful they can, which means that I want to see them be innovative, self-directed, critical thinkers in their own ways.
I'm committed to my kids having a collaborative experience, and the way that I do it is through pair shares, making sure they're working in teams, they're sitting at table groups, making sure that they're collaborating, because the workforce nowadays is huge on collaboration and working together. There's no more just one person anymore.
Why do you think it's better to work with a team than to do it by yourself?
Because a team, you guys are all working together and can do it faster and have more ideas than just one person.
Collaborating means everyone has a part, everyone works together.
I'm committed to making sure my students are more self-directed. I have given students the power of grading themselves through rubrics, and that allows them to kind of take a self-directed path to meet that goal and to meet that standard.
Sometimes when I'm with a team or I'm in a group where we have a project and some of them maybe won't do as much, I will have to guide them through, and I have to also teach myself as we're going through the process. And that's really helpful for myself and everybody else.
I think it's important for them to be innovative. It really helps them become leaders in the classroom. It also helps them show their strengths and to really work on something that they feel strongly and passionate about. It shows the creative side of their brain. It really gets their critical thinking skills flowing.
James, what does it mean to innovate?
You take two things and to make something new with them, two or more.
It means to be, curious and creative.
I am committed to making sure that my students leave this classroom with more empathy, because we really want them to go out and make a difference. If they can start by understanding how each other feels on the playground or in the classroom, hopefully they'll be able to take that to the next level as they get older.
It means to feel what somebody else is feeling like. I think if you didn't have empathy, then people wouldn't show you empathy.
Well, because they may help us in the end. They may help us make a greater idea.
Critical thinking is going deeper into what you're being asked and not just learning the facts. In life, it's not just a yes or no answer, so if I'll use critical thinking to help me solve problems out in the real world and just be a better person.
It's not just the content, it's beyond the content. In order for them to fully understand the information and the content, that they need to be able to think outside of the box and truly have a deeper understanding. I'm committed to having my students leave my classroom as stronger critical thinkers.
That is such a powerful video. And there are certain things in that video that just kind of tug at me. One of them is that all the adults say, I am committed, or, my commitment to the kids. And so that really got to me. And so is that what a shared vision looks like?
Yeah, I think you're right on, Dr. Nanez. And you saw that me to we, right? Because they were all speaking a common language and they all owned it. From the kindergartner or the preschooler to the adult in the room, they were all talking about it in similar ways and knew what it meant. And so I think that really gets to the me to we. What did you see, Sid?
Yeah, I loved how each of the learners could articulate really well. They have a deep understanding of each of those characteristics. And you can tell that this vision for what they want for their graduates is really embedded throughout all levels of their learning system. And so that really stood out to me. You may have noticed too that most of the learners were in the video were elementary age students. And when we're talking about a graduate profile, we're not just starting this development in high school. These are characteristics that need to be developed and cultivated from the time a learner enters the system, all throughout their journey towards graduation or whenever they exit the system. And so that me to we mentality and mindset really matters when it comes to embedding these things throughout the different layers of the learning community.
Sid, thank you so much for pointing that out, that most of the voices that we heard in this video come from elementary students. And here we are sitting talking about the profile of a graduate. So that's, I believe what we mean when I say beginning with the end in mind. But now we know how it should sound like, it feels like when this is part of a community and the organization of a school district. So our task now is to develop the profile that is applicable to our own community. And so, we have examples of portraits of graduates. And if you could go back to the first one, if we could just go back to the one that we just left. Yeah, so this is the example of the the video that we just saw. Is that correct?
You've got it. That's exactly. And you can see that they've translated it into Spanish also on their website to make the language transparent across their community.
Right. And what I love about this profile is that it is so clean and concise. And it's something that everybody could understand and start speaking to as they work through the process that we've engaged in. And they came up with these characteristics for their students, for their graduates. We can move on to look at another example from Texas, from Belton ISD. And so could you talk a little bit about this example?
Yeah, so you'll notice that the number of characteristics doesn't have to be the same from portrait to portrait. In the previous example, there were 5. In this example, there are 6. The important thing is that the portrait or that one-pager document highlights what's important to the local learning community, what the kids need to know and be able to do by the time they graduate to be successful regardless of whatever path they choose after they graduate. And so as far as design and the number of characteristics, those are all really locally driven. But the idea and the purpose is the same, and that's elevating the priorities for the learning community that everyone will work towards. And this one-pager portrait is just the place to start that journey.
Right, and I can see some chat. We are an industrial community, and so we have to make sure that our students are able to be successful out with the career of their choice. We have so many wonderful opportunities in collaboration with the Workforce Commission that we have here in our community, and so we know college is great. But we also know that we need students to engage and decide on a career. And that we have so many opportunities here in the Permian Basin that we want to make sure that all our students understand what is out there for them. But we want to make sure that we prepare them for success.
That's right.
Yes. So, in order to determine this, we have to think about the future. We really do. And so I would like to invite Jason, the Director of Strategic Forecast, to come on. And Jason, first of all, tell us what your job description means.
The title's an interesting one, but essentially I'm part of a team at KnowledgeWorks that is tasked with thinking about the long-range future, or rather futures, for education and learning. To put it a different way, the crux of our job is to think about quite a few things, not the least of which is change. So we think about change, what it might mean, really long-term for the future, and where those possibilities lie. So one of the joys of our work is we get to spend a lot of time with folks like you, working with your communities to think about change, to think about ranges of futures, to think about where the opportunity lies, and then to really begin to settle in on not just what could happen, but what do we feel as a community should happen? And then how can we start to put in plans to really bridge the gap between our current reality and those types of futures that we want? And we started off talking about shared vision in a profile of a graduate. To me, that's one of the most powerful tools to think about what it means to develop a shared vision for what we want and what we want our community and our students to aspire to be. So for me, this acts as a microcosm of a vision. It tells us what the outputs are. And then we could start to think really critically about what the inputs might be that we need to make those qualities, skills, dispositions in that profile come to life.
So Jason, you really brought up a lot of really great points. And I know that change is something that a lot of folks don't like. But there was an article in the Houston Chronicle about a month ago that talked about the Permian Basin and the skill sets that our community must have now when they're working out in the oil patch out here in the petroleum industry. And really, it was such an eye-opening article about how much the Permian Basin's oil and gas industry jobs have changed over the last 5 to 10 years. So we learn a lot about history, but forecasting the future is such an interesting thing. So talk to us about how we can forecast future and what we need to consider when developing and finding those characteristics within our students.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple, we'll call it a primer into thinking about the future, right? So a couple of ground rules just to start. The first one, most important one, is that nobody can predict the long-term future. It's just not knowable. If we're talking about the future 10 years ahead, 20 years, 30 years, there's just too many variables, right? It is impossible. If we were able to predict the future, think about what life would be like. We probably wouldn't be having this conversation. We would have it all figured out, right? It would be, life would be a lot easier, perhaps a great deal more boring. So what's this mean, right? It means we have to start thinking about change. And from our standpoint, change comes in two big flavors. The first is the inbound change. So it's change that we've got to deal with, that change that's happening to us. I think that when we talk about the article you shared, the educated roughneck, how is oil in the oil industry changed? That's a fantastic example of that inbound change, that there's just a different set of requirements to work out in the field now. The other side, the flip side to this, is outbound change. So this is the change that we have agency over. This is the change that we put out into the world. If we think about a strategic plan, we think about personal goals, most certainly if we think about a profile of a graduate. It tells the world where we're going to put our time, our agency, our energy, and our resources behind. And it frankly signals to the world what our values are. So these things are important to us as a community, and we're going to move towards them. So
and I think it's, I'm so sorry. I think it's interesting that you put change in two buckets: the inbound change, the change that happens to us. That's really the change we don't like. Yeah. And then the outbound change that we make a conscious decision to change. And so I think that really categorizes the type of change and why we need to change. I like that.
Oh, I appreciate that. And so, inbound change is not always bad, right? Like we can get a new job, we could have new family members, get married, so it's not all bad, but I think generally, when we think about change, especially now, especially after the past couple of years, our first reaction is, oh my goodness, more, and then what else is going to happen? So for us, we put all these things together, right? And really, when we boil it down in this most simplistic form, for us, thinking about the future is really about making and managing our assumptions about what's going to happen with this change in order to depict a wide range of possibilities. So that when we start to think about the profile of a graduate, one of the things we really want to do is start to think about the ways in which the future might be different. So with that, one of the questions that we ask ourselves going forward is, why do we believe things change? So why do we think things change? Why is the present different than the past? And I say this part as a reflective exercise, but for the folks that are joining us, we want to hear why you believe things change. So please add it to the chat box. Dr. Nunez, I'm curious from your perspective, what is one of those really big drivers of change? Certainly my colleagues, Sid and Abby, curious to hear from you. But our goal too is to make this a conversation, not sit and get. So I never want to tell somebody about what the future is or isn't. I want to act as a guide so we can create this map together.
Right. So I think things change because again, we evolve continuously. Our environment evolves, our community evolves, different expectations and standards that we are expected to reach are constantly changing. So I think, that's one reason why we change. And then just the speed of life, technology has brought so much, and just we've changed the way we do things just because of the speed of life. What do you think?
I think you're spot on. The speed of life. It really, at the end of the day, the only constant that we have is change. Even though we want to push it away, we want to minimize it and reject it. Abby and Sid?
What came to mind for me is technology. Technology has changed the way we communicate, the way we access information, even the way we navigate. When I was growing up, we had a huge road atlas in the back seat, in the back pocket of the passenger side of the car. And boy, you were doing your best to guesstimate using that scale, how long you were going to be in the car going to new places. And now in the palm of your hand or in the technology within your car, you have really precise, even adaptive predictions based on weather and traffic and accidents of when you'll get to a certain place. And I just think technology really has revolutionized a lot of what we do day to day.
Mine was similar. It was innovation in general. Think of things that innovate and something new and better comes along. And sometimes it can make our lives easier or better, or maybe not always. And so we have to learn from those and make those choices and choose to accept those innovations or not.
No doubt about it, right? And I love the fact that at the end of the day, there is a critical choice, right? That we do have agency as to how the future can unfold. So moving forward, to put a finer point to this, you all are right? There is no one answer. There is not one predominant right answer. And for us, we think about change fairly broadly. We want to cast that net when we do research as wide as possible, as deep as possible. So we use an acronym called STEEP, almost like steeping a tea bag or making a cup of tea. So for us, we're always looking at broad change, and this can include sociocultural change that Dr. Nyanya has highlighted, technological change that everybody highlighted, changes to the environment, changes to the economy, political changes. All of these things add up into creating a world or a future that's different than today in both large and small ways. So continuing to kind of go down this path and moving forward, we can start to get some concrete examples. So could you go one forward for me in the slide deck? So looking at communication, right? As we look at this, yeah, it's technology driven, but again, for the folks that are joining us, I'm interested from your point of view, what's actually changed in this picture? Yeah, the device is smaller, but if we think about STEEP as a whole, there's a lot going on here. The cost of the device has changed, so there's an economic change. There's a political change in that a lot of government resources were put into developing the chipsets that power that phone. Looking at the sociocultural aspects of when you use a device and how you use a device are also different. Going one forward, transportation, the same idea is at play here, where there's a lot to unpack really in this picture in terms of change from the past to the present. Certainly the transportation looks different. The folks that are riding the bus will look different. The cost of using that transportation has shifted. Even the environment surrounding the transportation looks different. One is slightly more green than the other. Going forward we see pronounced changes at school. So yes, the rows of desks are still there, but if we look at the current example, we see a technologically infused classroom, a smart desk where in the past we would have had a slate desk. The student-teacher interaction looks to be a little bit different. I would imagine that the building would be different. And the list goes on and on and on. So going one forward, even the home, right? So we're starting to get at some ideas for how the future might be different. And one more, please.
So yes, we want now engagement from our viewers, right?
100%. So it's one thing for us to list out changes and sort of go through the thought exercise about what shifted. But when we start to talk about forming that community vision, what we really need is the changes that you were feeling that are somewhat maybe more pronounced than some of the things you've seen in those photos. So I'd like to invite folks to use that chat box and begin to list those trends and changes that you feel are important to the future of ECISD and your broader community. Remember, we try to think as broad as possible. So not just changes in the school, changes in the community, technological changes, economic changes. The beauty here is you can't be wrong.
And I already saw some really interesting comments. We saw one viewer say that, outside of book knowledge, skills that cover finance, goal setting, basic budgeting, those real world experiences and connections, we have to make sure that our kids are really understanding the importance of those job ethics, time management, those soft skills, that come with job ethics.
I love that. And, it's certainly true too, that no matter how much change we're looking at, there are some things that are constants, right? Job ethics, soft skills, all critically important.
And also, yes.
As I recall from a previous conversation, don't you have some new industry moving into the area?
Yes, in fact, we do. We do have new processing industries moving into Ector County ISD. And so we have to be ready to provide the workforce for those new, the new innovation that is coming to our community. So we must be able to provide that education and background to provide the workforce.
That's so exciting.
And what I love too about that question is that it's layered. So it's not just the industry moving in, it's the know-how to build the infrastructure for the industry, all of the surrounding industries that would come in to support whatever moves into Odessa and the Permian Basin. So there's a cascading effect at play here too that I think is really interesting. So again, folks, we want to invite everybody into this conversation. Your input is going to be what drives this. Again, it's not just what's changing from our perspective, but what really matters here is what's changing from your perspective.
Right. So we do encourage you to use the chat box to just throw out some ideas that you feel, are critical. We also want us to think about questions such as what will change look like in our area, and what jobs are in demand today, and what will be the demands of those jobs and skill sets possibly in the future? Would it be digital competency? I know 10 years ago we didn't have computers in some of the work trucks that the employees of the petroleum industry used. Now every single vehicle has a computer and a smart device. So what will that look like? Technology. We're going to have to develop very competent users of technology. And again, our whole goal is to develop students that are ready for college, ready for their career choice, and ready for military.
I really, really appreciate VC Rivera, the idea of conversational skills as a must. We spent a lot of time thinking about the future of work at KnowledgeWorks, and we've had the privilege to hold these conversations with folks all across the globe. And that idea that we have young people that are digital Da Vinci's, yet they lack the ability to hold a conversation, was seen as hugely problematic. So that's a plus one to that comment for sure. Anise, consider the stress and pressures of parents, students that affect how and what is learned is also huge. So that creates a different need in terms of those skills, knowledge, and dispositions. They could be, there could be some things on the social and emotional side around emotional regulation and how we effectively deal with stress. Certainly that's true of the working world as well.
Absolutely. And Dr. Miri just chatted that, yes, 70% of all jobs developed in Texas will require some form of that post-secondary credential, whether it's an industrial-based certification or an associate's degree. 70%, that's a lot of secondary or post-secondary study and work.
Most
So
definitely.
yes. And I love the idea of, having apprenticeships, within our school community. We already have started working with interns across our system. And so that really is an exciting idea that we should expand on. And again, yes, finance, we see that trend. But then there's a question we want to ask: what do people do during their free time? And does that drive change in our community?
I think absolutely, right? I think all of this blends into kind of this larger idea of what we want young people to know and demonstrate what they learn and be able to do. So it's a recognition that learning doesn't stop just in the classroom, that even in the future, the things that we might do in our free time would go towards cultivating those future profile of a graduate aspects. So one of the things that I'd like to do is move this conversation a little bit from current change into the future space. So going forward, thinking about all of the changes that we just heard, we want to do a little bit of idea generation. Because again, the future exists in these two components: what could happen and what should happen. And one of the ways to get at a more grounded version of what should happen is to think deeply about all the ways the future could come to fruition. So again, I want to take a lot of those changes that you just heard about, that we just spoke about, and I want you to situate yourself 10 years in the future. And based on the changes that we talked about, based on the changes that you're thinking about, how might they have played out in 10 years' time? How might ECISD and the community at large have shifted? And if it's easier to boil it down to a microcosm, this could be just thinking about what might the area look like. Certainly there'd be new businesses, new restaurants, there'd be new community members. What jobs might be in demand? We saw some fantastic stats in the chat around workforce, and you heard from Dr. Nunez about new businesses coming in. We've seen some fantastic ideas around what school could look like. And we talked a little bit about what could happen in your free time. So we want you to noodle on these ideas about how the future might be a little bit different, because we want to go from this idea of, again, what could be, to get it down to what should be. So based on our understanding of what could happen, what skills, knowledge, dispositions might somebody need to navigate and thrive in a future that maybe looks different than it does today?
Very good points. So we want everyone to really think about, what we've discussed. And we're going to ask those of you that are online watching to think about this question. So we want you to think about what should every ECISD student know and be able to do by graduation that will help them navigate in a rapidly changing future. So we really want you to think about that. So if we could put that question up on the screen, what should every child, every ECISD graduate know and be able to do? So we could move to the red slide. There we go. I want y'all to really, as Jason said, noodle on this question. And so we're going to put a survey, it's a very short survey, into the chat. You can either click on it if you're logged in, and we're also going to have this on our website. We encourage everyone to participate. We want you to think about what every ECISD students should know and be able to do by graduation that will help them navigate in a very rapidly changing future. So we will see the survey links pop up on our chat, but we will also then have this survey in Spanish. And so para todos los padres que necesitan la información o la encuesta en español, vamos a tener todas las preguntas en español también. So we will have this survey in English and in Spanish for all of our parents to be able to, or community members to engage in. So, let's think about, we hope that all of you just take a few minutes to engage in this survey because your input is important. I love this. Self-determination. Austin Reynolds, thank you so much for that. That's a great characteristic that our students should have. That's a great idea. We see empathy, critical thinking to really solve solutions. Sometimes we don't have that stamina or that grit to work through a problem. Sometimes that we want immediate solutions.
Dr. Danyas, what I'm seeing too is that in the survey, you can put several different words or phrases in there, and you're seeing that in chat too. So if you see the question repeating in the survey, we wanted to give you a chance to have multiple inputs. And then at the bottom, we ask you if there's any more still. So feel free to put all of your ideas in there, and we would love to read through them with the team at ECISD that will be going through all the inputs.
Yeah, so you'll see the question repeated several times in the survey to give you the opportunity to share all your thoughts. We give you 5 opportunities. Do you have to answer all 5? No. But if you have more than 5 ideas, we actually encourage you to add your additional thoughts to the survey responses. So we want to thank our partners tonight that are here with us, Jason, Abby, and Sid. We appreciate the partnership, the collaboration that you all have done and engaged with us to improve our district, to get to where we have a well-written, concise profile of a graduate that is meaningful to the Permian Basin and to Odessa, Texas, and Ector County ISD. So for all our viewers tonight, I'd like to just review the ECISD graduate profile process one more time. So again, we are at the point where we are at the final stakeholder data gathering session, and that's tonight. So as I mentioned, we've gathered data from students, from district and campus leaders, from the institutions of higher education, Odessa College, UTPB, and community members across the city. And so this was our final meeting. You are so important to us, our ECISD staff members, parents, and our community. And again, we have an ECISD working group that is working with Knowledge Works, the folks that you see here, alongside Contigo Ed, to determine and process what trends we see as we gather the input. And once we determine and identify those trends, we will come back to stakeholders to share those trends with you to get further feedback on the trends that we see, with our goal to have the ECISD profile of a graduate finalized by December of this year. And then what will that lead to? Establish expectations for all our students beginning in pre-K. We in ECISD are now serving 3-year-olds. And so we want this work to impact even our 3-year-olds as they enter our buildings and start learning and understanding what it means to be an ECISD student in pre-K, in 5th grade, in 8th grade, and ultimately our graduates. So at this point, again, thank you viewers for joining us tonight. And we are very grateful to all of you that shared your thoughts and ideas on our show tonight. And we thank our team at KnowledgeWorks for being our think partners, our thought partners through this process. And so we wish everyone a wonderful evening. We have a football game going tonight. It is actually Thursday night lights instead of Friday night lights at Ratliff Stadium. So we'll see you all out there. Have a great Friday and a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.